Hey, well, good afternoon. If I can get just everyone's attention, we'll get started. My name is Joey Gilbert. I'm with the Associated General Contractors. I want to welcome you to our 2023 legislative update from our good friends at DFCM. I wanted to introduce and turn over the mic to John Kemp. John is our 2023 AGC Builders Committee Chair, and he's put a lot of work and effort to fix this lunch today for you, so I want to make sure I give him some time. John? He cooked it. It was all him.
Cooked it, put it out, everything. Well, again, welcome. The other, in addition to the welcome to everybody that's here, we also, this is being broadcast to St. George. So everybody in St. George, welcome. And we're looking forward to a lot of great information today. Also, in addition to a couple other people I wanted to recognize, Rich Thorne in the back, President and CEO of AGC, soon to be turning that title over to Joey, who just spoke to you, in 10 more days. So that's been a really long career. Rich, thanks for all you've done, and looking forward to working with you, Joey, more. Also, Jim Russell, Director of the DFCM, is here up front. Matt Boyer is also here, Assistant Director, and he will be presenting to us today. Scott DeGraffenreid. Scott, where are you at? Right here. He is the AGC Legislative Committee Chair. So thank you for being here. We also like to recognize any board members or any committee members at the AGC that are with us also today. So we're going to turn the time over to Matt, and Matt's going to go over one or two legislative issues or discussions, and then go right into the projects, upcoming projects we're going to be looking at this year. So with that, Matt, I'll turn that over to you.
Oh, I'm good either way. Good either way.
Yeah.
All right. So I appreciate the opportunity to come out and to be able to discuss this past legislative session and kind of go over all of the funding that came about from this past session. It was another good session for DFCM and the state of Utah as a whole in regards to the investment that they put back into the design and construction industry. Just to go over a couple brief things. Well, the order will be a little bit different. We'll go over the projects first and then kind of hit some of the key legislative updates that came out as well. But overall, we had 46 different projects that were approved and funded for a total of just a little under $2.4 billion worth of work for the state. The new capital development projects that were funded for the DABS, we have a new warehouse addition that will be happening down in the Salt Lake area. For those that are familiar with their existing warehouse space, you can see that that's a large $108 million project. And then we have 3 stores, new stores that will be coming about, 2 that will be replacing existing stores in the Roy and the Moab area, and then 1 brand new one down in the Ogden area. For the DNR, we had a Loa fish hatchery, which was finally funded, which is one that's been, for those that follow the legislative session, this has come to the legislature for the past 3 or 4 years. It got a lot of support this year, and we're excited for that. GSL, the Antelope Island Visitor Center, is an existing project that got funded last year, and it got an additional $15 million to that project. So that project's about a $27 million project now. And then the Utah Raptor State Park, which is one that I'm managing down in the Moab area, that received an additional $14.3 million. UDOT presented and submitted for a new signals and maintenance lab facility up in the Ogden area. If you are familiar with that area, they have one over on I think it's 2nd South and Wall Avenue. And so they'll be looking at some different property locations for that new replacement facility, but that will be coming up. And Craig McKay is the project manager assigned to that. For the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority, or the Point we got some significant funding for this project. The first one's Convergent Hall. This is going to be a new type of facility that will host a bunch of the different universities and academic institutions from across the state. It's really going to be a collaborative opportunity for all of the institutions, like I said, to have representation within this space in this building. It has $50 million of state appropriations. There will be some fundraising efforts as well. And the idea behind this is that some of the students and K through 12 students will be able to come into these spaces and be able to interact with some of the CEOs of the major technology companies and research facilities that will be down in the point in the research park area. And so it's a great opportunity for that. The infrastructure project and the Draper Prison project that both Mike Ambry is the project manager on, they both received additional funding as well. On the infrastructure, I believe they have the $65 million currently, and then they received an additional $108 million for that. So you can see that they're making a significant investment in the infrastructure that will be going on at the point. And then the Draper Prison demo, like I mentioned, received an additional $15 million to cover the costs that came in on that. For the Department of Corrections, they received an additional $2 million of ongoing funding for some of their current projects. One of the projects for that, or that will go towards, is some housing opportunity down in Washington County area. They're looking at building a new facility down there, and we're just in the process of getting that property purchased. And then also, Craig has an existing West Jordan Behavioral Mental Health Facility that he received an additional $6 million on that project. Up in the North Capitol Building, the North Capitol Building Plaza and parking structure received an additional $25 million, and the architect and contractor have already been selected on that. Block 407 Master Plan. This is a project that was submitted by Public Safety and DFCM. Public Safety did a feasibility study and kind of looked at the safety and security protocols that are in place for the governor's mansion and what that looks like and how we could, potentially make their dwelling safer for them and for those that come to the public that comes to the governor's mansion. It also includes some renovation space that will happen at the Glenn Denning home. But this is an opportunity really to be able to help separate the public versus private space that will be part of that project. It gives an opportunity for the governor's mansion when they pull in that they'll be able to come in through some underground parking and be able to access the house rather than having to park out in the open and then walk into the house. And it really will help increase the security level for the governor's family and whoever resides at that residence. So this next one is for two different regional centers, one that will be down in the Ridgefield area and one that will be in the Farmington area. One of the things that we've been pushing on DFCM side is to increase the productivity and increase the regional, basically consolidate spaces and bring different state agencies together rather than having them spread out throughout the region. This is an opportunity to retire some lease spaces and some areas where the property that they're in right now or the buildings that they're in are pretty dilapidated and the cost to renovate them would exceed the value of those buildings. And so this will give an opportunity to help, like I said, revolutionize those spaces and bring in some more teleworking spaces, some touchdown spaces, and then consolidate some of the different state agencies that are spread across those areas. The small school district capital project funds received an additional $50 million. This is an account that was set up last year, and it goes to small school districts throughout this state. It's an opportunity for them to receive state appropriations for their new school buildings that will be required. As of this point right now, we're not sure what DFCM's involvement with this loan or with this fund will be. However, we're working through that with them to see how we can best serve and provide an opportunity for them if needed. Now to higher education. Mountainland Technical College received about $66 million for a new campus in the Wasatch area or Wasatch County area. This is a new campus for those that are familiar. They have a new one that's going in down in the Payson area right now. This will be an additional campus, like I said, up in Washington County. And it is currently going through programming. It'll be coming out for design solicitation once programming is complete, and then probably for a CMGC service or some kind of contractor selection on that. The Sully Community College received approval for a $31 million project, which is in addition to their business building. They're currently just had the architect selected for programming and design services. They don't have a contractor that's associated with that project yet, and Ashley Greenwood is the project manager that's been assigned to that project. SUU also received an approval for their business building addition. That's down in their Cedar City campus. Clint Bunnell's the project manager, and that has a budget of just a little over $17 million. Utah State received some state appropriations and some approvals for non-state appropriation projects. The first one is the Huntsman Experimental Learning Center. That's will be a new facility up there on campus on this. If you're familiar with Utah State's campus, it's kind of on the south campus end there. And then they also received approval to renovate, I believe it's their science and animal engineering or animal testing building. That's now going to be the science and engineering and research building. Lucas Davis is the project manager on both of those. And for bonded projects or non-state funded projects, they received approval to construct a new student housing in that South Campus region area. That's just a little under $50 million. And as part of that, they'll also be doing or constructing a new parking terrace over there in that same region, right next to the student housing. Utah Tech University received approval for a Cox Performing Arts Center. This will host the Southern Utah Orchestra that will be that's part of that region. It's part of their Cox Auditorium building that's currently existing, and it's a remodel / an addition to that building. And then they also received approval for a land bank to purchase property as part of their master plan. University of Utah received approval for the Thomas S. Monson Center that has some parking safety improvements. Right now, we have it listed as U of U managed. However, we received a request, and it sounds like we'll probably be managing that project as well. And then also there's the Price Computing and Engineering building. This one actually has the architect and the design team that are part of that, and we're working through that. And Lori Katska will be the project manager on both of those facilities. One of the things that happened this legislative session as well is that we received approval to move and build a building for the Army Reserve that is currently located up in Fort Douglas up there at the University of Utah. That property will then be able to be turned back over to the university. And that, for those that may be familiar with the Special Forces Readiness Center that was constructed over at Camp Williams, let's see, it's probably been maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We'll be building a very similar type facility that will happen out there for them out there at Camp Williams. Part of the non-state funded projects that the University of Utah got approval for is the undergraduate student housing. This is a $382 million project. The President Randall Taylor up there at the University of Utah has a goal to have or increase student housing by 5,000 beds, especially for those incoming freshmen that are coming into this university. Right now, the university is investigating potential P3 options or a public-private partnership that'll happen for that. And so they're just kind of looking through that and deciding how best to proceed on that one. They also got approval for a new South Campus parking garage that Lori Katska will be the project manager on, and also West Village Family and Student graduate housing. That West Village project is currently in the process of a design build solicitation. And so we're just going through that right now. And submittals are being, well, we're currently going through charrettes on that project right now. Some additional funding that came with the University of Utah's projects. The Huntsman Mental Health Receiving Center received an additional $6 million, and the West Valley Hospital or health facility is also, it's been named as, received an additional $25 million of ARPA funding that will go towards that project, and Taylor Maxwell is the project manager on both of those. Weber State, as part of their engineering technology building, they've been phasing some of the remodeling that's going on with that project and that building. Mike Smith's the project manager on that, and they are just moving into the next phase, which is an electrical and mechanical upgrade that's part of that project. They also received funding to set up a new campus down the Farmington Station. They're currently leasing space down there, and they're looking, this property purchase will allow them to be able to own their property and set up a new campus, and then bring the infrastructure to that property. That'll be part of that project. Snow College had three additional land bank requests that are part of their campus master planning, and they received funding approval for all three of those. And they'll be working with the DFCM real estate group to be able to make those property purchases. And then as far as a couple of other notable projects, the Olympic Parks Improvements or the Olympic Legacy Foundation received $43 million of pass-through funding. DFCM may have some involvement in that. We're still working with them to see their capabilities in managing those, but they did receive $43 million of funding for additional improvements and upgrades to current facilities. And then the last one is the Wasatch Canyons Behavioral Mental Health Facility. This is a existing mental health facility in the Salt Lake County area. They received $25 million that went to DFCM. It will be a pass-through funding, and we'll just be working with them to see their capabilities and if they need any assistance on that project. Overall, we received an additional 120, or we received a, let's see. Yes, we received $125 million for what we're calling a state agency capital projects fund. In this fund, we received some restrictions. We can't expend any of that money currently until March of next year. But what this does, this sets up an ongoing funding source that will allow us to be able to take state projects and state agencies that have building requests that will be coming up and be able to look at how we can utilize that and help fund them. It sets them aside basically a dedicated account, much like the dedicated credits that happen for higher education. And so this is a great avenue for state agencies and a real win for them this legislative session. That way their projects don't have to go and necessarily compete each year with some of the higher education projects. It'll also allow DFCM to be able to take existing facilities that we may have here in the Salt Lake or Northern Utah area or Southern Utah area at some point, but it'll allow us to take those current facilities that you have and remodel those and upgrade those and kind of retrofit those spaces to reflect the current working environment and teleworking agreements that they may have with their employees, and really make that space more utilizable and updated to the current working conditions. We also received $110 million for the last year's funded projects that went through DFCM. This is an appropriation, just to give you an idea. We had about little over $142 million of requests that came in off of last year's projects based off the escalation we've had this past year. We've been in the process of divvying up that pie to each of those projects and sending those out to the project managers, and they're just working through that now with their teams as to how best to move forward. This past year, we also received $210 million of legislative appropriations for the capital improvement program, which is a big win in that regards. We have quite a few different project managers, and so at the upcoming agency meet and greet that will happen here in, I believe, in April, it'd be a great opportunity to come and meet some of those different project managers and see who's assigned to them and get to know them and be able to find out how you can help serve on or work on those projects. One of the big things that came out of this legislative session from a building side is the 2021 adoption of the IBC code. One of the big parts that was, or maybe controversial parts of that, was the gender neutral bathrooms that's part of that. That kind of went and got debated back and forth. There was a resolution that happened where House Bill 53 amended what that allows. So currently, as part of the code, and with this adoption, what will happen is they will be able to have or build, if they would elect to, up to 50% of gender neutral bathrooms within a facility. The stalls have to be floor to ceiling. They have to have 2 points of egress or access points to the bathrooms. It will increase the size of the bathrooms overall, but we feel like that was a win as we have several universities and agencies that are looking for those within their facilities, and so it was a good compromise in our opinion. So I'd like to open up for any questions that you may have.
July 1st on the codes?
Yes, that'll happen on July 1st.
Seeing any movement between DFCM's realize CNBC, it's on bill,
So the question was, is if from a DFCM standpoint, if we see any fluctuation happening or occurring from our construction delivery methods, whether that's a CMGC, design build, design bid build. I would say at this point, we're still looking and evaluating each project at a project by project basis, depending on what the needs of that project are, and then trying to identify what's going to be the best delivery method for that. You know, we've had some great success with design builds. We've had some great success with all the delivery platforms, to be honest with you. One of the things that depends on and what we'll continue to see is probably we haven't had as much participation, I feel like, on the design build side this past year. And I think that's probably because of the escalation that's occurred in the market, and contractors, you know, it's really hard at that point to provide a price without a design and lock subcontractors into those prices. So we'll have to evaluate what the market looks like and what the escalation continues to be. You know, just lately I've heard different numbers as to where even 2022 ended up as far as escalation. We're hearing some reports from our professional cost estimators that it ended up landing over 15%. I've heard from some contractors that landed at 12%. And so I think there's still a little bit of a different interpretation of where 2022 ended and where 2023 is headed. We're hoping for at least a plateau, if that's possible. However, adding $2.4 billion worth of work to the market may not do that. So we'll have to be a little cautious in how we approach things and how we put projects out there, just to kind of help control costs as much as possible. But it'll be, to answer your question, Aaron, it will strictly be on a project by project basis, and what we feel like will be the best way to get those projects completed successfully.
I got a question for you. There's a significant number of projects that we've been sitting on that haven't bid out. What's the plan for those? And how much does that total that also be funded this year?
So the question was, DFCM currently has a backlog of projects that we were not allowed to put out to bid until after March of 2023. That came through the last year's legislative session. And what is the plan for those projects and what the value of that is? It's another significant chunk of work. We're still looking at putting that together and getting a list of where all the different projects are at through the design process. Some are getting close to being ready to bid. Some are still a few months out, or even up to 6 months out. That value's pretty close to about another $1 billion worth of work total.
Well, our non-state plans too, though.
Yeah, with the non-state funded, it is closer to over $2 billion worth of work. And so you can see there's a significant backlog that's coming and building up. And so we're trying to be as cautious yet judicious as we can in getting those out and still hitting the milestones that our state agencies or higher education partners need for those. So it's a fine balancing act that we're trying to weigh and trying to do our best in making sure that we're being cognizant of how these projects affect the market overall. Any other questions?
Hey, Matt?
Yeah.
Of interest maybe is with doing away with the building board, maybe describe how you guys will evaluate projects going forward and how they will make it onto that prioritization rate for the next budget.
It's a great question. The question is with the building board being done away with, I don't know what the right word, demolished. How will future state agency requests look like in the, moving forward, and how will that affect the legislative session? So the way it happened this past year is the state agencies submitted their project requests, which involves typically a feasibility study or program. It involves a capital development needs statement that we post on our website that anyone can go and view and to see what that looks like. And then Jim, myself, and our cost estimator will review those requests. We have a scoring matrix that we put together just based off of several different criteria. One of it's based on life safety, functionality, or need of the agency that's requesting. There's some scoring criteria for how long it's been coming through the loop. So the projects that have been on there a little bit longer and have continued to express that need, they get a higher prioritization or they get more points for those projects. There's a couple of other different metrics that go into that. And then what we do is we take that list and we present it to the governor's to the governor's office, and they take a look at it and make sure that they don't have any concerns with it. And then it goes forward into the 5-year book and into the to the IGG committee for review. Projects that come through the non-state funded request process So a state, if an agency, for example, we received a request the other day for Parks and the Division of Parks. They have a new maintenance facility or maintenance building they want to build up at Echo State Park. What that looks like is they'll submit a letter to DFCM committing the funding and several other metrics and requirements that they have to do as part of that. And then it'll get posted directly. If Jim approves it or the director approves it, it gets posted to our website so that anyone can see that, hey, here's a state agency project that just got approval that hasn't gone through the traditional means, and you probably wouldn't have heard about it unless you went to our website and saw that that was approved for to move forward. So that's kind of in a nutshell, a brief summary of how those projects work and what that looks like. You can view all of these projects that I've presented here today on our website. We have a list with all the project managers assigned to them and the value for those. And then I believe there's a list as well for the capital improvement projects that has all of their PMs on there. And if it's not up there yet, it should be shortly. I know Daryl's been working on that. And so all of those are available to view right on our website as well.
I have a little bit for that.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Just while we have the opportunity, so this last session, I worked with Senator Buxton to put it's SB 168 to put in place a fund for state agencies similar to the SB 102, if you've heard of that, for higher ed, where they each have their own bucket of money. So the fund allows us to take appropriations from legislature, allows us, as we renovate and reduce our inventory for buildings, to be able to take that revenue and put in the fund. And then as we work with state agencies that are in leased space now, when we get them out of lease space, we can capture that lease revenue ongoing and put in the fund as well. That was where they gave us the 125 million for this year. That the total requests in that chunk is actually $500 million. And so the process, like Matt's right on how the process will be prioritized. That's how we've done it for the last few years. And we haven't had the building board actually for the last couple of years. But it will be a little bit different in this fund because there's $125 million sitting there. So this next year, we will be prioritizing how we want to spend that $125 million. And then also, we have to determine how much we want to request for this next year. So among that, as part of that big pie, we have a $255 million project that's called our statewide master plan and renovation fund. So what that does is we renovate in Salt Lake County. It's largely renovating buildings like Cannon Health, Heber Wells, State Tax Commission, Oline Walker, some of those buildings, and moving leases in and consolidating the space. We've gone from, with teleworking, we used to be like one desk for one person, right? Every employee had a desk, if that makes sense. Now we're somewhere past. It could be even like 3 people per one desk, but we certainly will land on at least 2 people per one desk ratio. So you can see that's like half of our space, right? So as we consolidate and we can get out of leases, and then that $255 million investment over the next 8 years will save the state $1 billion net present value over 50 years. So that's a huge savings. And as Matt mentioned, it also allows us to do like we did in Taylorsville, where you walk in the front door. It's a little crazy right now if you haven't been there. You got driver's license on one side, DLD on the other, you got BCI down the hall. You know, you've got one-stop shop, especially in the rural area. That would be great. So in Salt Lake County, we're going to renovate some of our large buildings. That's about $120 million worth of it. And the balance of it is in the rural areas. Richfield is not one of those, but Farmington was one of those projects. But it will create new regional centers in St. George and Cedar City and Moab and Vernal and Logan and Box Elder, and, you know, all around the state that does the same thing, brings the agencies together. So when we complete all that, we eliminate about 18 buildings that the state has and about 73 leases. And so all of that revenue can come back to that fund to fund future projects. So we'll have it, the fund will self-generate some, and then the legislature will give us some ongoing. But the difference between what we've done in the past is that we'll send forward this next year how we want to spend it. And we want to spend it to where we are not, you know, right now, if we get $30 million for a project, we spend 29 million of it in the last 6 months of the project. or whatever, 25 million of it, right? So we want to capture all of those dollars and start programming one year, designing a next year, and then constructing so that we're overlapping projects in a more thoughtful way. That way the agencies now can get their projects in theory 3 years earlier, 2 years earlier. And then Matt was nice when he said Lowell was like 2 or 3 years. It's been like 7 years that's what it takes, a state agency, 7 or 8 years. So this process that we got in place this year is awesome for state agencies. Higher ed, every year they go to get their projects funded. State agencies, they go back and they have to present year after year after year. And so they won't be doing that anymore. We'll actually probably make the presentation for them based on what we prioritize the highest needs. That renovation will be mixed in with other buildings that are on the list, like a new emergency operations center in Taylorsville and Fish Experimental Station. I don't know where some of the others that didn't get funded, Matt. I don't remember. There's one.
Public safety warehouse, the O&M lab edition.
O&M, yeah, there's anyway, so there's other projects, but then this renovation fund, and we'll bring that all together in a way, you know, that makes it a little bit more effective in the future. So the process, it was a good question with the building board. It's completely different now. It's really about us presenting the way we feel like we should use the money, getting the approval of the governor, going to the legislature and getting the IGG committee's approval of it, and then request and get additional funding each year. So, and obviously we can't spend 125 of that in 1 year. So we'll start a lot of projects next year from that fund. And what that money is, they gave us the money and then they said, well, we're basing this off projections right now, and projections on revenue doesn't always bear itself out. So they put about between us and UDOT, they put about $1 billion buffer in there, so that there's dollars that they committed, but they can't be spent until the projections on the first week of the session next year come into play. And if they're where they expected, then we're moving forward. Without having to go, it doesn't have to be approved again by the legislature, the projections just have to match. Maybe I made that more confusing, I don't know.
Is there any other questions that we can answer for the group? Go ahead, Eric.
So, you had gone away from the set fee structure for CMGC projects and had mentioned that you're gonna kind of monitor, what pricing comes in from us. How far are we into that process and how much longer is that gonna last?
That's a good question that I don't have the answer to quite yet. We have been watching it to see where it is. Some of the fees initially started coming out very similar to where our fee structure was. The last few projects seem like they've crept a little bit higher in some of those regards. I think that a lot of, and even some of the feedback we're hearing on some of our CMGC projects that were under the old fee schedule was that the staffing a project requires at this stage of the economy and the market takes more personnel than it did in the past. And so we're starting to see those fees, especially for supervision, creep up a bit. And so we probably, until the market calms down and we get a little bit better grasp as to what things are and when lead times maybe start coming back to some kind of realistic expectation, we'll be able to finally pinpoint that out and figure out where that needs to be. Any other questions?
On the building board process, will you remind them that the whole 5-year plan and that we do publish that, right? We do put that together at the end of the year.
So Jim just made
all the projects.
Yeah, Jim just made the comment about DFCM in the past. We've published a 5-year book that wasn't maybe necessarily an actual 5-year book. It was more a representation of what the projects that had been submitted for that year's request look like. We still do that, and we're pushing the agencies, especially higher education as well, to get a more accurate 5-year book that actually forecasts what their projects will be coming up. We publish that on our website, so if you have any questions as to what projects were not funded this year that will be coming likely back next session, you can view that on our website, or if you have any questions as to where you can find that, you can email me or give me a call and I can help walk you through that. It should be pretty easy to find. So if you, like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to either shoot me an email or a text or give me a call and I can help walk you through that.
Next year, that'll be the second week of January. Right?
Yeah, so next year, and just one other comment Jim mentioned for those that are online with us is, we try and have that book published by the second week of January. So you can go in there and see what projects have been submitted, where the prioritizations of those came out. and take a look at that and kind of have something to follow through the session if you're interested in that. Any other final questions?
Hey, Matt, I believe we have the slides that you presented today on our hard drive from the film drive. Are we able to share that with folks that may want that, or?
Yeah, I think this question was if the presentation slides are able to be presented, or if AJC can distribute that to its members. Absolutely. The more eyes on it, the more participation we get on our projects, the better off we feel like our projects are. So we very much welcome that.
Unless Matt put any naughty notes in it, I don't know.
We may have to send you the PDF version. How about that? Any other final questions?
Finally.
Is there, I have a question, is there a common pain point that the DFCM has that we can all as builders be supportive of and contribute, you know, be aware of? Like, is there a common pain point that we can, you know, as an industry here try to address?
So the question was, if DFCM has a common pain point that we experience on a project.
Is that customer flag?
And to answer that, I think anytime a project exceeds the budget, we experience pain on the project, right? It puts stakeholders, they start reeling as they start to think about what part of their scope they may have to cut or lose as part of the project. And so I know one of the things that I had a call with, or a conversation with one of our project managers just literally an hour and a half before this meeting, is he was expressing some frustration that the estimates we're getting during pre-construction aren't matching what they should be on bid day, or they're not even close. In some cases where, you know, a project, he's, you know, in his words, he said he's tired of having to go back and tell the agency we're $5 million over budget. And that's like on a $35 million project. So you can see that that's a big gap to try and overcome. So I think that, you know, we continue to try and push pre-construction services and making sure that the type of cost estimating we get is going to match, you know what I mean? If we know that we're going to be $5 million right off the chute, it's a lot easier for everyone to start scaling back and working through value engineering options at that point. But when you lose 3 or 4 months trying to work out value engineering solutions, and the way the market's been with the escalation, it's really hard to ever catch up and be right where you need to be, because the more time you lose, the more escalation continues to go up, and then it's almost a net neutral effort. So that is one thing that that's probably right now the biggest pain points that we're experiencing at DFCM is on our project side, is making sure that those estimates that we get are realistic and are going to match up on bid day. That's a great question.
Hey, Matt, just a question that, you know, $2.4 billion was a fantastic win on the legislative session this year. Obviously a testament to DFCM and the legislature belief in what you're doing, the good work you're doing there, as well as the contracting community. But as far as that number, any idea on how many projects that represents? I mean, I could probably go through and count all those if you probably said it.
Yeah, the very first slide I think had it here. Let me skip back. I want to say it was 46.
Okay.
Yeah, but you've got to add about 320 capital improvement projects.
Yeah, that is true. If you add the capital improvement projects to that number, that does bump that project number up significantly. Just on the development side and land banking side, I believe it was 46, if I'm not mistaken. But
I just tested everyone to see if they were paying attention.
that's a good question.
Only on the PhD level.
Right. Any other questions for? Okay. Oh, Chamonix. Yeah, so that was for the FY23 projects that were funded, specifically that went through the capital development project request process that the legislature approved last session, or well, not this last session, but the previous session back in 2022. And so those are projects just based off of where their estimates currently are going through the design process, and where their cost estimates are shaping up. That's what that fund will help address, is that deficit that's currently there.
And I just touched base on what that question was. I think the first
So-
context of that was.
Yeah, the question was, is on that $110 million for project escalation fund that got appropriated this last session, is that for this year's projects, or what does that look like in the expenditure of that? those projects, or that $110 million specifically addresses the FY 23 projects that were previously appropriated in March or last year, or well, 2022 session that occurred. So there's probably, I don't know, 10 projects or so that were appropriated under that fund or that session, and that $110 million go to address those. Another good question. Well, I hate to keep you longer than you need to. Looks like everyone's done eating, so if there's no other questions, I'll turn the time back over to John.
No need.
John,
You know, I think we're waiting for them to say, hey, see you later.
you want to make a comment?
More extroverts. You're trying to. Don't grab everyone. Have a good one.
How are you? Good. See ya.
Yeah. I've been looking for it. I think it was one, and I was trying to. It's all just. I probably. Okay.
I think he's just, he can sit and laugh and make fun of, let you get up there and do it. So, that place had a lot of. We're all. That's what Al. Yeah, that's just because they've got a plan. I mean, that might be a problem at all. I can't get. Still very. That part's around, a lot of them just get around again. You know, they don't have.